What the hell are we supposed to use, man? Harsh language?
Hello, folks. Welcome back to another Better Call Saul episode recap. Season 6, episode 12, Waterworks. The second to last episode of the series. And I'll tell you, there were a couple scenes where the waterworks were actually flowing a bit.
It was very intense.
I got a little choked up like once or twice, and it was very intense, but it was also pretty emotional.
Yeah, it was.
So
it's not looking so good for our Happy Ever After, Dan. I gotta say.
It's not.
In fact, it's looking quite grim.
Yeah.
And so do I. I believe that until proven guilty, every man, woman, and child in this country is innocent. And that's why I fight for you, Albuquerque. Better Call Saul.
What's that? You tell me.
So episode 12, Waterworks, folks, catches us up with present day Kim. As I think we predicted this on the last episode. I don't remember if we predicted it while we were talking about it on the show or if we talked about it amongst ourselves. I know we had the conversation, but we actually get a look into Kim's life, Kim's post-Jimmy life. And
I guess you can call that a life.
What a fucking... Let me tell you something. I never want to witness a man be murdered in my apartment because... that shit turns you into some fucking Beaver Cleaverville fucking zombie.
Yeah. She's doing puzzles.
Yeah.
She's wearing terrible jean skirts.
She's using
getting
fucking...
fucked by a dude that just constantly says, yep, during sex. That shit was terrible.
She's living her best life.
But the most egregious part of all, Marvin, is that she's using Miracle Whip in tuna instead of mayonnaise.
Yeah. You know me, I don't like none of that white shit. Mayo, Miracle Whip, white sauce from Halal.
People
miss me with all that shit.
But yeah, so she's living quite a boring life, and it makes sense, right? Because the life she was living with Jimmy was one of danger, really, right?
Right.
And then that all culminated in them two almost getting murdered by Lalo and witnessing Howard die in front of them.
Yeah.
And
her life was boring, like Jean's life was boring, working at Cinnabon.
Yeah. So this was her...
probably worse.
This was her retreat. And she's living in Florida. She's working at some fucking sprinkler company. But we get actually her perspective of the scene we saw in the last episode where Jean is in the phone booth, assumed to be talking to her, and they're having a heated conversation, and it ends with him smashing the phone and kicking the glass out of the phone booth. As we find out in this episode, he was in fact talking to her, and she's kind of surprised to hear from him. She looks very shaken up when one of the secretaries is like, "Oh, Kim, you got a phone call from a so-and-so." Forget the name he used, the alias. She knew it was him.
Yeah.
And at one point during the conversation, Jimmy is sort of like, "Oh, it's been 6 years." So we get an actual like measurement of time. It's been 6 years, I assume, since they last saw each other. And we actually get a glimpse of the last time they saw each other later in the episode. So
they wouldn't have any reason to reference anything else.
Yeah. So we now have an established timeline, folks. Current Jean life takes place approximately 6 years after Breaking Bad, probably a little bit more. Because later in the episode, we actually get a scene that we'll talk about in a little bit. But this conversation doesn't go well for old Gene. He's trying to sort of like catch up and reconcile, and she's just not having any of it. And she says another thing that we predicted that was going to happen for the remainder of the series is that she says, like, you need to turn yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
So she knows everything that went on with Saul Goodman. In a case involving the deaths of 2 DEA agents, global meth empire, you would assume, because what's her name got probably arrested, or not arrested, she died of ricin. But the ricin girl,
yeah,
you got to imagine that like her whole shit got exposed and uncovered.
Right. Yeah.
But she flips the script on him. Or he flips the script on her. He tells her to turn herself in and confess.
She actually does. She goes to Albuquerque. She goes and visits her old stomping grounds at the courthouse. She files an affidavit with the district attorney, and she presents that affidavit to Howard's late wife, basically explaining everything that happened, that her and Jimmy devised this plot to make Howard
his character.
make Howard out to be a cocaine addict, and that eventually leads to him being murdered by Lalo. And the wife, obviously she's shaken up by this, and she's like, "Oh, Howard was murdered." And Kim's like, "Yeah, he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." And they sort of have this conversation, this pretty heavy conversation, where Howard's late wife is like, "Oh, where's his body?" And Kim says she doesn't know, and that they'll probably never find it, which I'm sure she's right. Well, not true, because they did find the body. They just couldn't identify it.
Right.
There's also a really pretty gut-wrenching scene after this where Kim is riding the bus back to the airport, and she kind of just like uncontrollably starts crying on the bus. And it's not like just type of cry. It's like a burly, like
yeah. She's not sobbing. She's bawling her eyes out.
Yeah.
I mean, she was crying, dude. She's been numb for like 6 years, living a fake life.
Mm-hmm.
She's crying for her old life with Jimmy.
I don't
her life
think
as
so.
a lawyer for Howard's wife.
Oh,
I think she's crying for Howard too. Like, she's been holding all this in, and I think she was finally able
letting
to
a lot of shit off her shoulders
in that scene on the bus.
The way I took it was kind of what Dusty just said. Like, I think she already mourned those things. Like, she mourned Howard, she mourned Jimmy and her former life. I think this was more of a cathartic cry of like, oh, finally I could release this weight. You know how, like, have you ever had like an anxiety attack?
I don't know that she mourned them all. Like,
not mourn, and
probably
like
tried to go through the process, but that was part of it. Like,
mourn is a bad word. What I meant was like she came to terms with those things. This was more of like a release of like, I don't know. Have you ever had like a bout of anxiety and afterwards you're just like super fucking tired? When you deal with like a trauma or something. When you remove yourself from it and you're free of it, it's almost like your body just sort of flushing itself out. That's how I took it, but it's probably a combination of all the things we just mentioned. And then we catch up with good old Gene, where the cliffhanger from last episode, where he's breaking into the cancer guy's house. And Gene's just fucking robbing him blind. He's walking around, he's playing his fucking piano, he's rifling through his paperwork, getting his passwords. Then he just decides to fucking leisurely sipping on a fucking drink, stealing some cigars, stealing some watches. And
this is so not like our usual cool, calculated Gene. Like,
and I said,
it was like so tilted or something. It was very weird.
Well, I mentioned last episode that it's almost like he wants to get caught. Like he's almost he's like done with all this. Yeah, I
mean, what does he have to lose besides his freedom at this point?
I mean,
lost his wife, lost his good life.
Yeah. What is freedom if you're not really free? So maybe he wants to get caught. I don't know. But there's something going on with him. And there's a moment later in the episode, again, that we'll get to that sort of paints a clearer picture. But while Jimmy... I never know what to fucking call him. We're going to call him Gene because it's black and white. So while Gene is rifling through this guy's house while he's passed out on the floor, guy actually wakes up. And there's a little bit of a moment of sort of, it's like a thriller. This guy's sitting on the stairs blocking Gene's exit from the house, and he's looking at his phone. Right. And Gene basically, he's in like a loft, so there's no other exit really. And he basically decides like, all right, I'm going to take this urn with this guy's dead dog's ashes. That's pretty heavy. And I'm going to fucking smack him over the back of the head with it.
Yeah.
Luckily for that guy, he passes back out on the stairs and Gene doesn't have to do that. And as he's about to exit the house, throughout this whole scene, our boy Jeffy outside in the taxi waiting to pick him up. Cop car pulls up behind him, and it's the cops from previous episodes' little post-credit scene thing, or like tease for the next episode.
Yeah.
And at first, you're not really sure why the cops are there, but it turns out they're just there like eating dinner for the night.
Mm-hmm.
One of the cops is complaining about his shitty fish taco, and in an act of heroism, Jeffy decides to drive his car into a parked car to sort of cause a distraction for Gene to get out of the house, and Jeffy gets arrested. And this sets up the climax of this episode and perhaps the season, if my theory is correct. Jeffy gets arrested for his accident, and he calls Gene at home, and he's like, hey, pretending he's dad. Hey, Dad, I've gotten arrested. I need your help. And, you know, in typical Saul fashion, Gene's giving him some legal advice and saying, like, listen, they think you robbed this dude's house. They got nothing on you because you don't have anything on your possession, all this stuff. Gene calls Jeffy's mom, and boy, was that a mistake. Jeffy's mom is Marion, played by Carol Burnett, who's been really getting into her fucking laptop, looking at cat videos and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And last episode we saw, she looked out the window at their little backyard meeting. She got a little sus.
Knows something's,
She knew something was sus. And in this one, she gets a phone call from Gene saying, yo, your son's in jail. We're going to go get him out. And she's sort of like, something ain't right here. Why'd he call you and why are you calling me?
Right.
But I think it was the Albuquerque comments that really set her over the edge, because like, oh, no, you don't know him. He's been in trouble before. He's in trouble with Albuquerque. And he's like, oh, this is nothing like Albuquerque. Like, he knew Albuquerque was. And
Yep.
This old bird just got
I said while we were watching it, old people are not to be trifled with. You think they're slow and they don't know what's going on and they're confused. They are fucking smart. I remember when I was a kid, I used to try to trick my grandmother and lie to her and shit. She always knew I was fucking full of shit. So, Marion, waiting for Jimmy, fucking God, I can't stop doing it. Waiting for Gene to come to the house to go to the jail to pick up Jeffy. She's doing a little ask Jeevan. Jeevesin, I guess you would say. She's asking Jeeves. Albuquerque con man. And who comes up but Saul Goodman? And she makes the connection. Gene comes through. He catches her basically watching one of Saul's old ads.
Commercials.
Yeah. And he's not too happy about this.
All that. And Marianne is the one. Should have never gotten that
he's ready to
fucking
strangle
laptop.
her.
Yeah,
it was scary as fuck when he was curling up that damn phone cord.
There's a really scary moment during this whole exchange where you think he's going to strangle her with the phone cord that he yanked out of the wall. He goes, here, let me help you with that. And he fucking yanks the shit out of the wall. And he's actually like tangling it up on his hands, like, to get tension on it, like he's going to fucking choke her out. And then she reaches for her life alert little thing, and he grabs that off her neck. And you're like, holy fuck, this dude snapped. He's about to fucking kill her.
Yeah. Yep.
And then she says, I trusted you. And you see a little quiver on his lip. And he, instead of choking her out, lets her do her thing. She calls the police, and he runs out of the house. And that's the thing that I wanted to talk about. It's always been known throughout this series that Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman are very two different personas. Jimmy McGill, yes, while he was sort of the guy who cut corners, took the easy way out, or took the easy path to whatever he was trying to do, rather than playing by the rule of law like his brother would have wanted him to.
Right.
He has a heart. And he's really not a bad guy. And he does want to help people. He just has his own way of going about it. But there was always that part of him that felt like a pushover, that people walked on him. That's how he felt about Howard. That's how he kind of felt about his brother. And Saul Goodman became the person that doesn't get stepped on. So Saul is all the things that Jimmy couldn't be.
Right.
And Saul doesn't have a heart.
Nope. He's a real piece of shit.
And we're seeing Gene in conflict with those two things. This comes full circle, this premise in the last scene of the show, of the episode, where throughout this whole episode, by the way, we forgot to mention it, it's sort of telling the story of him and Kim's divorce, her sending him divorce papers and stuff.
Yep.
So the last scene of the episode is Kim visiting Saul Goodman's office when he's like full on Saul, and he's signing the papers, and he is like cold and heartless. He's just kind of like got his feet up on the desk, doesn't give a fuck, tosses the paperwork after he signs it, and like there's a moment where Kim sort of like, has an emotional reaction to that naturally, like, oh, here's this dude that I loved, and he's like a different person. And as she's walking out of the office, we see Emilio walking in. Well, Emilio, if you remember, is one of the two guys. He was Crazy Eight's partner who was working with Jesse. And she steps outside and lights a cigarette. Camera pans up, and who but Jesse Pinkman is standing there. Bums a cigarette, and they have a little conversation where Jesse recognized her. Turns out she defended, what was his name?
Elio?
No. The big guy who got killed in Breaking Bad.
Dang, I forgot his name.
With the mohawk.
Couldn't tell you.
Oh, it was Jesse's friend. It was in Breaking Bad. He was the dealer who got shot by the kid, who was it was a big part of Breaking Bad. And it turns out that Kim had defended him when he was a kid. And they have this little exchange where Jesse is
Combo.
like...
It was Combo.
Combo, thank you.
Combo.
Yeah.
They have this exchange where Jesse's like, so you knowing the law, like, what do you think about this dude on TV? Is he a good lawyer, or is he just full of shit like everything else on TV? And she says, he was when I knew him. And that is the nail in the coffin of the fact that, like, Saul is a very different personality to Jimmy.
Yeah.
It's almost like his defense mechanism in a way. It's his wall.
Right.
And that was really heartbreaking. And that's, you could tell is...
Yeah.
What
Especially in this new line of work. That he's doing. He has to be Saul 100% of the time now. I think there's no room for any cracks in the wall.
Well, he's in deep at this point.
I think the shift for when he started to really just kind of become more of the bad guy during the Sandpiper case, when Howard started taking over and started extending it, and then he didn't get his money and all that.
Yep.
And then he just had the crazy vendetta against Howard. That's when he really started like shifting.
And also, let's not forget, his brother Chuck was kind of a dick to him his whole life.
Yeah.
All Jimmy ever did was like try to get Chuck's approval that he was never going to get. And despite that, he was there by his side. He took care of him. He threw his fucking wacky ass agoraphobia or whatever the fuck he had. So like, while yes.
Yeah. And we found out that Chuck was the one that was like,
Chuck was the one who
all along he was like, nah, don't promote him or don't give him a real shot or any of that.
Exactly. So while yes, Jimmy was not like a great guy, he still had a heart. And I think it's these life things, like I said, people walking on him, namely his brother, that led him to finally taking on the persona of Saul. It's like, well, fuck it. If I, so
makes you cold.
Yeah, it does. As we've been doing, let's try to make a prediction about the final episode, which is next week. And I got to say, I really don't know where they're going with it, but this episode ends with Gene running out of Marion's house. We get a little teaser for next episode, which is a flipped over car and him repeating the secret password, if you will, to the vacuum guy, whatever the model number was.
My prediction, so you called it out when we were watching the episode. When Kim comes to Albuquerque, we see that Alaska logo thing.
They made a point to finish on that.
Yeah, maybe because Gene is obviously on the run now. I think maybe they gotta head down to Alaska to continue his life in hiding. But you had a good theory, Dan.
Yeah,
you were talking about
my theory. I can't see this going anywhere else other than Jimmy either getting caught or turning himself in, thus allowing Kim's character to come full circle, getting back her license to practice law and defending him, or not to get him off, but to at least let him have a fair trial or whatever. Because there was that moment when she was in the courthouse where she sort of looked over at the public defender who was helping that like homeless guy, like she was helping him with his shirt and tie and stuff, and she misses that life.
That used to be me.
Like she loved law though. She loved it. She stepped away because she no longer felt worthy of practicing the law when herself was responsible basically for a man's death. So that's my prediction. I think he's going to get caught and she's going to defend him ultimately at the end. Dusty, what do you got?
Absolutely not.
No?
No.
Always the contrarian with you.
You guys didn't think it was her on the phone with him in the phone booth.
I said it might not. We said it might not.
I just said we didn't have confirmation.
We did not have confirmation.
Which we didn't.
So what's your prediction?
Thought they were going to get back together. They're obviously not. I don't think this ends well. I don't know that maybe he gets caught. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. He may escape. He may not. But I don't think it's going to come down to her defending him. I don't know that we'd see that. It's possible.
So you just think it's going to be like a bleak ending?
So we got one more scene, and it's with
Walter.
Mm-hmm. So the only prediction I guess I could make that would be wild would be like Gene going to visit Walter on his deathbed. Somehow they're still in touch.
There's no way. Walt died at the end of Breaking Bad. Well, he's dead, but there's never a firm confirmation.
Correct.
But he's dead. Come on, he's dead.
Oh shit!
You don't think it's possible that he saw him one more time before he died?
First of all, if they do that, the fucking planet would explode. There's no way they're gonna do that.
Why not?
Because I think the scene. Well, because Marvin made a good point. That scene that we saw, the car crash, the little glimpse of the next episode, is in color, and that being in color would. I mean, we can only go by what Breaking
Bad era,
what they've taught us. That's Breaking Bad era. Probably
but they're quick to deceive us with that stuff because we thought Jimmy was going to be in trouble at the end of the last one when the cops were showing sirens when they were breaking in the house. So
gotta wait another week, but there you have it, folks. That was tonight's episode of Better Call Saul, the final season. Second to last episode, Waterworks. Very good episode. Very excited / depressed for next week's episode.
One more. That's all we get. One more.
Yep.
No more cliffhangers, please, because this one was another criminal one, and
we're sick of the cliffhangers. Vince Gilligan.
Yeah.
But yeah, folks. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our other YouTube videos like this one and our podcast audio over on our website, harshlanguage.tv. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and leave your thoughts down below. We'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.
See you. Costa.